Let's go through the papers then in a bit more detail with royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Heydel-Mankoo and our very own Neil Oliver. Gents, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Neil, let's start with the Observer, should we? Looking at being patriotic, and Labour says, well, if you want a patriotic party, it's them.
I know. I find this. I cannot. I am breathless at the audacity. Writing in today's Observer, Lucy Powell, the Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, says Labour is the party which now stands up for much-loved British institutions, trying to position Labour as the Party of Patriotism. The either party, frankly, either the Conservatives or Labour would have the temerity, the unmitigated gall after the last few years to claim love of country, absolutely takes my breath away. I mean, from 2016 and the Brexit referendum, when politicians of every stripe colluded in an attempt to thwart the will of the largest plebiscite, to demonstrate love, if there was a time to demonstrate love of country, it would have been in standing up for and with the will of the people, which was not done. And in so many ways, it's demonstrably the case that neither party is committed to anything heartfelt. I find that both parties are hollow. They are guided by what they think is the whim or the notion of the day. There's no commitment from either Boris Johnson or any of his little wizards. Neither is there anything from Keir Starmer or his. And I find it the most blatant, hypocritical power grab for Labour to stand up and say that after what has been going on in recent years that they are the Party of Patriotism. I am appalled.
Oh, what do you reckon, Ray?
No, I agree completely. I mean, the Labour Party of Kevin Attlee was a proudly patriotic party, but that bears no resemblance to the party that we see today. There's been this sneering condescension towards this country, towards English people. You remember Emily Thornberry and a condescending attitude towards the flag. And there's been this elevation of identity politics and over British culture. It's almost as if any identity is fine to have in the Labour Party, apart from your British or your English identity.
Yeah, oh, do you know that you do get a sense of that? I was saying on air the other morning that it's nice to be able to feel proudly British without having to sort of somehow apologise for it at the moment.
Yes, I mean, I think it's important, to say that the Jubilee, it's a splendid moment, and it's bright and it's uplifting, but it is just a day. It is just a brief and transient time, and reality for people, the everyday lived reality for people at the moment is hard and getting harder. And what people need from politicians at a time like this is some kind of leadership, and also a sense from them that they believe in the same things that the people of the country broadly believe in. And there has been a gross dereliction of duty there. I don't think there is anything heartfelt in the political class, or if there is, it's not demonstrated. They keep that light under a bushel for some reason. And I think it's so important. Yes, Jubilee, great, good to see it, good that these moments are marked. But what we need at the moment is leadership. And this tawdry attempt by Labour to just pick on the latest thing to claim that we are the Party of Patriotism it's just a blatant attempt to try and obfuscate from reality.
But it's important to remember, 2019 was supposed to be the great realignment election, when the country moved away from using economics as a distinction of which party you belong to culture. Because culture is now the real determination. And we've seen that with Brexit, we've even seen that in COVID reactions. And the Labour Party lost all of its small c Conservative patriots who came over first to the Brexit Party and then with Boris Johnson to the Tory Party. And that was supposed to have set the battleground for the future. And the great lost opportunity, I think, are all of the scandals that have engulfed the Tory Party, because you needed to have at least one more election to solidify that small c Labour vote. And the disgust that you're seeing in the country towards the Tory Party makes it almost inevitable that there's going to be a huge loss of seats. So I think Labour sees that, and Labour's trying to get back those small C Conservative voters who they lost.
In terms of what you say about people's view about the Tory party, Nadim Zahawi, who actually some are saying could be a potential leader, in the Mail on Sunday, talking about free speech, because of course there is the Tory scum yelling which goes on at times. He's saying, well, yell it all you like, it's free speech.
Yes, well, he quotes here Ronald Reagan, who said, "Freedom is always one generation away from extinction and must be fought for and protected." And he's written a piece here in the Mail based upon an experience he had at Warwick University, where he was cancelled by the braying mob and shouted down, "Tory scum, Tory scum." And there's a great challenge facing the country, because if all those who had voted in the last general election had been limited to people under 25, Jeremy Corbyn would have had over a 100-seat majority in Parliament. There wouldn't have been a single Tory MP elected had the youth of Britain voted in that election. And this is something that the Tory party hasn't come to terms with. There's a great challenge going on, and universities are the hotbed of all of this. There's a complete radical agenda in these universities. Suppression of free speech is not a rare thing at all. It's gone in my lifetime from having 2 liberal professors for every 1 conservative professor to having 8 or 9 liberal professors for every 1 conservative professor. And in that environment, students don't feel that they can speak up. When they see this happening to a minister of the Crown, there's a suppression of free speech on all levels. So whilst the government's been very disappointing on so many levels in terms of its culture war and attack on the working issues, on the one issue of free speech, they have been very good, actually, in talking the talk. But I'd like to see them actually walk the walk and demonstrate.
But what about, I mean, the reality then is, is to contemplate the online safety bill, which, again, I struggle to put into words how irate I feel about that. It's trumpeted as something that is somehow going to secure freedom of speech online, and it is absolutely the antithesis of freedom of speech online. It's going to leave the big operators, those in control of the big social media platforms, with little option but to take the safe route, which is basically to censor anything that moves in advance. Better that than face the consequences of inadvertently or otherwise putting something out into the open public domain for which they could be criticised. The online safety bill is a disaster for free speech. That is online is where most people, that is the public square now. The social media platforms are in lieu of the public square. That is where the ideas of the day are supposed to be discussed and debated. The online safety bill is going to make sure that is even less possible. So how anyone from within the Tory party can claim that they're standing up for freedom of speech in the context of the online safety bill, I do not know.
Well, I mean, it's the public square in the modern age. What it's meant to be, what was always the place we used to go and discuss our thoughts and air our views was down the pub, Neil. The Mail on Sunday, looking at the fact that there could be up to 10,000 pubs may close, as well as that places, fish and chip shops and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it here actually. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is that the lived reality for people, the Jubilee notwithstanding, the reality is that tens of thousands of businesses in the hospitality sector face closure. The fish and chip shops I'm reading elsewhere in the Mail, likewise, facing closure. The devastation that has been wrought upon the economy by the disastrous, the policy disaster that was lockdown and everything that went alongside it. That is what is the reality for people living in the country today. And my heart bleeds for people who spent lifetimes building up small businesses, building up restaurants, cafes, looking after pubs and all the rest of it. Fish and chip shop owners, all of that is so imperiled at the moment, and that's where the focus has to be. The Jubilee's been great, but someone has got to take responsibility for the other 364 days of the year.
Yeah, I mean, but when it comes to these small businesses and the pubs and the chip shops and all the rest of it, it's very difficult to know now how we actually go about trying to revive it, because that's surely got to be a lot of it just down to people power, just down to us saying, right, we'll go down the chippy tonight or whatever.
Well, no, absolutely. But there's actually a war of attrition going on against these organisations, because unfortunately, in the case of the fish and chip shops, for example, 45% of the white fish in the world is controlled by Russia. And there are import tariffs coming in on cod that's being imported to the UK. 40% of fish and chip shops here depend upon that source. Now, as far as we can see, things are going towards a stalemate in the Ukraine. There's no end in sight. We could be in even for a decade of conflict there. At what point does the world, the West, I should say, have to reevaluate sanctions? Should they or should they not? That's another debate. But the issue is, how can our businesses survive in such circumstances when there's no end in sight to these punitive restrictions.
I feel increasingly that what is needed is for the government to get out of everyone's way. You know, that thing about, you know, the most terrifying, you know, string of words in the language, you know, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That's absolutely the case. And it's demonstrably been the case for the last couple of years that the government, aided and abetted by the opposition, have completely undermined and destroyed so much of the economy. And what needs to happen, for goodness sake, is please, government and the rest of them, get out of the way of people who know how to run businesses, entrepreneurial types who just need the horizon cleared in front of them, and they will rebuild these things. The government would just get out of their faces for a while.
Well, look, let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. And I have to say, Neil, because I've been chatting away to Rafe for the last 3 days now. Since I started at GB News back in December, one of the things I always wanted to do, and I said to our boss, I said, I want to meet Neil, because I love what you did when you were walking around on the BBC all those years ago, and then love what you talk about on GB News, because you just give us a shot. Even though I don't agree with some of what you say, it's the fact that we can agree to disagree and just listen to your thought processes.
Well, that's the beauty of it. You know, a conversation or a debate by definition has to have both sides or as many sides as possible of the conversation. Otherwise you're just broadcasting from some kind of party line. And I think the great relief of being involved in GB News is that, I watch things on GB News and, you know, could shout at the screen in the same way that I would shout at the screen in the face of many other, you know, broadcasters. But that's entirely appropriate. Yeah. But we're all in one newsroom together, and all those ideas are just bouncing off one another, and that's dynamic.
How it should be.
And that's how you come up with compromises, and it's how you come up with solutions, because you're hearing, and you know, sometimes the solution comes from the most unexpected direction or the most unlikely source. But if you're not listening to everything, you miss out on the solutions and the compromises.
Yeah. Perfectly put. Look, Rafe, we're going to start with the Sunday Telegraph, should we? And looking at... I can't quite get my head around this. The House of Commons Library is going to be decolonised.
Can you imagine this? This is a leaked report from the House of Commons Library about an anti-racism plan, including a diversity audit. All of this following Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, which are uniquely American problems for an American situation. George Floyd has no relevance to this country. But it's funny how libraries around the UK and around the West are doing this. I mean, what's up with librarians today? You know, when I was a kid, there were nice, sweet old ladies with glasses on a chain. Now they're radical revolutionaries leading the charge for wokery. It's quite bizarre, and it's just going to this wider problem of the takeover of our institutions that's been happening gradually over the past 25 years, because they've come through the university system. They've been inculcated with things like critical race theory and gender studies and so forth. And you're seeing now, even in the heart of government, this is taking place. And if the Conservative government can't get literally its own house in order, I don't know what effect they think they're going to have on the rest of the country in leading the charge in the culture wars.
It's interesting that you say this as someone with a mixed heritage background.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the reality is Britain is not inherently racist. Britain actually ranks among the least racist countries, Northwestern Europe and South America, and every poll has been done in terms of who would you like to be living next to you, a person like yourself. These are the most tolerant countries in the world. If you want to see true racism, go to China and see how blacks are dealt with there, or go to India and see how they look at other people. We're so fortunate to be here, and this constant obsessing over race only serves to inflame the situation and increase the division between people. We should celebrate the fact that we have such a wonderfully diverse nation.
I would say that this cancer has reached an institution like a library. I find almost the most sinister of all, because this is the road that leads to book burning. You know, if this way of thinking has got into something like a library in the Commons or wherever else, then that is truly troubling. Because as in all things, you know, have more books, have more ideas by all means, but to go into a library and think that there would be things that you need to get rid of I find that dark.
Well, we don't learn and we don't develop by forgetting parts of our history, do we?
No, you've got to learn more. That's the whole point. And a library should be the richest, deepest reservoir possible of thought. By all means, broaden out the coverage that's available inside the library. But to go in with a mindset of thinking that something has to be undone, decolonised, that things presumably ought to be removed, that's sinister in the extreme.
And it's worth noting that they've said that books that would normally be eliminated will be kept if they're from diverse authors or have a diverse connection. So purely based upon that tick box, they'll be kept in. But as we all know, basically, we've had a quiet revolution over the 25 years. You can have a revolution without flying red flags from the rooftops. The buildings may look the same, but there are cuckoos in the nest.
Yeah. Let's talk to something I'm quite fond of, which is a cheap flight in the Mail on Sunday. Now, the era of cheap flights could be done and dusted, so says the Mail.
I'll be honest and say I find it difficult to ascertain whether or not all the travel chaos is real, or whether in some way it's being, I don't know, even engineered as part of an ongoing campaign to keep everyone on edge and inconvenienced. I really don't know. However, the idea is there that the era of cheap flights is over. You know, there's a couple of generations probably have lived on the assumption that you can, you know, jump on a plane, you know, get to the Med or get to wherever, and that it's been within everyone's reach. And now, of course, as in so many areas of life, I think we're being expected to live smaller lives. I think that's the reality, and I find that troubling. Of course, the elites are going to continue to roam the world in their private jets, which are, you know, apparently infinitely more damaging to the environment anyway than, you know, the kind of domestic flights that you or I would make use of. And I think this is part of the green agenda. I think it's all part of a move to, you know, to demonise things like, you know, like flight. I think cheap flights have become like the new smoking. It'll be something that it's deemed, you know, detrimental to be, you know, to be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And I think it's all just part of a push to have us accept smaller, more limited lives.
Yeah. Well, doesn't that sound depressing? Especially weather like this, where we want to see somewhere hot.
But it has to be resisted. You know, there's, you know, if there's, you know, Rafe mentioned a quiet revolution that's been going on. There has to be resistance to it. You know, we don't have to sit down, lie down, and accept this new reality that's being handed to us.
Yeah.
You know, everyone with a backbone, just get up and say no.
Yeah. Well, very good point. Look, I can't believe how quickly your 3 appearances have whipped by this morning.
Is that
You're
us
done.
through?
You're biffed. But you don't have to go in and enjoy the park.